Hey everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today is an exciting video. Why? Because I'm reviewing the first ever high-tier British premium light tank. It is the Senlac. This is going to be a great crew trainer for any of you out there who like the British light tanks in their current state in the game, or alternatively any of you who are maybe trying to think about whether this is going to be worth picking up so you can have an advantage inside the frontline game mode. The Senlac is very different to the other British light tanks. I'm going to let you know exactly what the differences are, how this thing stacks up to some of its competition, and whether this, like I think the other British light tanks, at least my initial opinion was that they were useless. Now I'm kind of thinking that they're just not really very fun. So let's compare the Senlac to a variety of other tier 8 light tanks, both its non-premium competition, the LHMTV, the classic German cosplay American light tank, the M4190, the Chinese variant of that, the M41D, and also the American T92, which this thing pairs up in a fairly similar fashion too. So first thing first, the Senlac has the same caliber of gun as the LHMTV. It uses an 83.4mm, but we can clearly see that not all 83.4mm guns are equal, as this one has 180 alpha damage compared to the 230 alpha damage the LHMTV has. And obviously that's not as high as the Black Dog, but it is better than the Chinese variant, the M41D, and significantly higher than the T92. Now the thing that really stands out about the Senlac, or shall I say it stands out about the LHMTV, is just how much of a disparity there is between the damage per minute. And that's because the Senlac's rate of fire is nearly 11 rounds, nearly twice that of the LHMTV, which gives it a damage per minute of 1,963 with its standard ammunition, which absolutely wallops the lowly 1,380 of the LHMTV. Now anyone who's played the tier 8 standard British light tank, the LHMTV, will know of just how infuriating it is that the vehicle just can't seem to get the damage out, to get itself out of tricky situations, or alternatively just to be able to jump on opportunities to be able to eliminate its foes. Now, unlike the tier 7 setter, the LHMTV does feel pretty good with its 230 alpha damage, and it is a kind of an advantage the tank has that it hits with an extra 50, but the crazy rate of fire that the Senlac has means that you can quite often fire 2 shots before you have to pull back, unlike the LHMTV, which you have to wait for an eternity, it feels like, to be able to fire off the second shot. Now, the Senlac, its rate of fire isn't quite as good as the M41D or the T92, but to have that decent rate of fire with an OK alpha damage definitely doesn't feel too bad. But its damage per minute, as we can see, is about 10% lower than the other premium tanks in this comparison. One thing I must mention about the Senlac, however, is that its penetration is significantly worse than the standard variant, but comparable to all of the other premium vehicles. If you load the gold, its penetration goes up to 223, which is decent, but it's not even close to the 250 that the Black Dog gets, for example. The LHMTV's standard premium penetration is 258, which is phenomenal. But there's one kind of ammunition that we haven't discussed so far today for the Senlac, and that is the high explosive. Oh my lord, 90mm of pen and 280 alpha damage. That is comparable to the Black Dog's fantastic high explosive rounds with its 90mm gun of 102 and 320, and it destroys the ammunition of the M41D and also the high explosive rounds of the T92. And just look what happens to the damage per minute of the Senlac if it manages to penetrate with its 90mm of high explosive penetration. It just destroys the LHMTV in every single way. 3,054 damage per minute, and you can make 90mm of penetration work on quite a few targets. Now I'm going to be showing you that in the gameplay as well. This is just the flexibility that you want, the skill to make a decision in the ammunition that you use, to be able to turn up that damage per minute and to be able to kill your opponents in 30 seconds. Even your tier 10 opponents in 30 seconds if you start hitting their weak points consistently, unlike the LHMTV, which just has awful high explosive rounds and no way to really up its abysmal damage per minute. Another thing which is awesome about the Senlac is the amount of ammunition it can carry. 45 rounds is way better than the limited 25 that the LHMTV can carry. But its 8,000 potential damage, while it's way better than the LHMTV, it still pales in comparison to the other 3 premium tanks here. Alright, so let's take a look at the gun handling of the brand new Senlac. 1.8 seconds aim time, very good. decent gun handling as well on the move and also when turning the turret, although its turret traverse dispersion is worse than the other light tanks in this comparison. It's only the T-92 which has better dispersion when moving than the Senlac. So this, all in all, this means that the gun handling on the Senlac is very comfortable and way better than the LHMTV, which has the worst dispersion when moving, when turning the turret, and 2.2 seconds aim time, so you're aiming forever even if you come around the corner or you peer over the ridgeline very slowly indeed. Combine this with 10 degrees of gun depression and 14 degrees of elevation, and you've got more than enough flexibility to be able to dominate a ridgeline in the Senlac. Alright, so now on to mobility. 65 kilometers an hour forwards, a little bit better than the LHMTV, and its power to weight ratio is 35, which is significantly better than pretty much all of the other vehicles in this comparison apart from the T-92. And that's because this is not a light tank. Unlike the LHMTV, which weighs less than 5 tons, this thing weighs 20, and so ramming is an option against quite a few other vehicles, including tanks like the T-92. The ground resistance on this vehicle are identical to the LHMTV, but as it does have a little bit better tank traverse, that means it's going to be more nippy, it's going to be more maneuverable than the standard British counterpart. But its maneuverability is worse than probably the other premium tanks in this comparison. Alright, now on to view range. Well, should I say armor first, actually. Its armor is negligible. As with all of the vehicles in this comparison, you're not really going to be bouncing reliably. With 1,050 hit points, it's definitely on the low end, but it's not as bad as the T-92. But now on to one of the most important statistics for your Tier 8 light tanks, that is view range. 400 meters means it's way better than the LHMTV, comparable to the Black Dog and the T-92, and one-ups the Chinese light tank. So, what do I think so far about the statistics of the Senlac? Well, clearly, in all areas, apart from alpha damage and penetration, it destroys the LHMTV. Just everywhere. Armor, I mean, on the LHMTV, it doesn't really matter. Of course, the LHMTV, you've got to consider, is significantly smaller than the Senlac. Look at this thing. This thing is as big as an HWK. Well, not quite as long, but it's as tall as an HWK. It's as tall as a Black Dog, but not quite as fat. Quite, I guess, a bit easier to hit from a side profile. But when we compare it to something like a T-92, you can see it's significantly taller. And when we compare it to the standard British counterpart, the LHMTV, we can see that the Senlac is monstrously taller, and this greatly impacts the camo rating of the vehicle. Fully tricked out, this vehicle has 31% camo rating compared to the LHMTV's rather nice, I believe, 39%. It's only saying 36 here, but that's because the crew are not trained to the vehicle. I believe the camo rating is 39 or even 40 on this tank, so that's definitely something to take into consideration. The camo rating of other premium vehicles, popular ones like the LT432, is at 37. If we put a premium consumable on that, that is going to go up to about the 39%, just under 39% mark. And the camo rating of the Black Dog, for example, is under 30%, although that's with one of my crews not being quite fully pimped out and having brothers in arms. So if I look on my other one, which does have all of those advantages, well, apart from the chocolate, gosh, I should have done this before, right? We have 30.43% camo. And so look, the Black Dog, the M4190, definitely not the most stealthy tank. The Senlac is by no means a stealthy tank. But it's not terrible. It's not as if you're driving around a medium tank. You are going to be able to sneak into position, but just not quite as well as something like the ELC even 90 or even the standard LHMTV. But considering that in every single other area, the Senlac just destroys the LHMTV and it has wonderful high explosive rounds as well, yeah, I'm expecting good things from this tank. And I just question why it's just so much better than the LHMTV statistically. Does Wargaming really think that size is that important to mean that you can have 50% less damage per minute than a premium vehicle, that you can have worse gun handling, that you can have worse speed, that you can have 20 meters less view range? Well, let's just see how it performs in the gameplay. Let's go! So here we go, we're rolling out on Pilsane and we're inside a mid-tier matchup here. We're playing against some tier 9 tanks with a variety of tier 8s with 1 artillery. I wouldn't really consider Pilsane to be the best of light tank maps. I'd rather get on something like a Prokhorovka or a Malinovka, right? Nevertheless, we're going to see what we can do in our British light tank. So while I was playing the Senlac, I definitely felt that little bit of speed advantage that it has over the LHMTV. It feels a bit more like the tier 9 British light tank, or even a bit closer towards the Manticore with regards to the speed. And that's something you need to consider, because it allows you to be able to get into position before the medium tanks or even as fast as some of the slower light tanks on the enemy team. Now, I want to push the Senlac down these bushes, and I'm going to try and position my tank in the middle of them so we can remain undetected. And I want to try and get in that bush that you just see ahead of us on our right. If I can manage to get in there, I feel that I'm going to be able to spot most of the enemy tanks, and we should be successful. Alright, so just going to go and sneak over into this bush, and then I'm going to sit here for a second. Haven't been detected yet, my sixth sense hasn't gone off, I stayed in the dip for just a little while. And the 10 degrees of gun depression this tank has, over the back and also over the front, does make it rather flexible. And whoa! ELC even 90! And you'll see that I fired my first AP round into his tank, and now I'm reloading high explosive rounds. He's under pressure, he's going to have to shoot at other people or not at me, or just try and get out. And look at that! 269 into the back of his vehicle. Didn't see any crits there, but trust me, when I was making use of these high explosive rounds, we were seeing some crits, and maybe we'll have some more in the gameplay coming up later on in this video. So 434 damage. That was the equivalent of 2 shots that it would have taken in my LHMTV, but the Senlac just put it out so much faster. While I was playing this tank, I felt so much more engaged with the shooting, purely because you don't have to wait forever to be able to reload the gun. As I mentioned, this vehicle has a base rate of fire of 11 rounds a minute, so that means a sub 5-second reload. So what that means is that when you're using a gun rammer and you've got very good crew skills on the tank, it's going to go down to more like maybe the 4-second reload mark. Whereas if you're using the LHMTV, it's not even close. So yeah, we can see our high explosive round didn't manage to penetrate the T-25 pilot there. It did 91 damage though. That's still pretty decent for a high explosive round. That did half the damage that an armor piercing round would have done if it had managed to penetrate. The high explosive round will always hit and will always splash, so they're going to be very powerful for a variety of tanks. Alright, so now we're going to be firing armor piercing rounds right through the side of the turret. And this is where just I feel that this tank, with its reload, just feels so much better. Sure, you're not doing as much damage with every shot, but in those all-in engagements, and not just engagements where you have to fire one and then either run or fire one and pull back over a corner, the Senlac feels so much more satisfying. Almost as if you're playing a Cromwell, or if you're playing a Comet. Not quite as good rate of fire as those two tanks. Still very good indeed. And with the enhanced gun handling that this vehicle has, and combine that with some vertical stabilizers, yeah, you can pull off some chancy shots, or even snapshot on the move. I think this thing feels a lot more like the Black Dog, or alternatively the T92, or alternatively something like a T49 at tier 8. That's the kind of vibe that I'm getting from this tank. It's dangerous, but maybe it only feels dangerous to me because I've been suffering for so long with the British light tanks, the standard British light tanks. Maybe that's why the Senlac feels just so good for me right now. It's a tricky one. We'll definitely be talking about it because, as you might have seen in the statistics when we reviewed it, all of the other light tanks, like the Chinese variant, the M41D, or alternatively the American. Wow, that was a big hit there from the UDES. You definitely don't have too many hit points to give away willy-nilly like that. Or even something like the Black Dog. Statistically, they look very strong. And I don't think anyone would consider the T92 to be an incredible light tank, but even the T92 has comparable damage per minute, better camera rating than this vehicle, and a lot of flexibility as well. I guess it really is the high explosive rounds on the Senlac that I think are going to be one of the hidden features of the tank. Wargaming have kind of made this a little bit of a counter light tank. And that's something that I've been really noticing makes me just so vulnerable when I'm playing the standard British light tanks. Everybody will just rush you because you're not a dangerous tank at all. You've got one shot, and then after your one shot, they've got all the time to be able to deal with you. So I made a bit of a dangerous play to go across out in the open there. I risked getting shot by multiple tanks, but I did it because I saw a Jagdtiger and I wanted to get juicy shots into the back of that tier 9 German TD. That gave us a decent amount of damage, 300 and looks like 18 damage, as well as the 515 fire. And you're going to be doing that so much more often because of the rate of fire that this tank has. I don't usually get crits in my non-premium British light tank, but when I'm playing this vehicle, I feel the crits, not just with the AP rounds, but also with the high explosive penetrations. It just feels so much more satisfying to use your mobility to be able to get past your opponents and be able to outplay them. That's what I'm really loving about the Senlac. And you can see here that we've managed to pick up 3 kills for it and 2,600 damage in this 5-minute game. And also, the mobility and the speed, and also the size that we had at the beginning of the game, didn't really matter too much when we were engaging the ELC even 90. We are not the smallest of tanks. The ELC even 90 is the smallest of tanks. It didn't really matter. It was just about getting into position and spotting the other vehicle and then using your rate of fire or your damage per minute to be able to shut them down. I was able to win that light tank engagement at the start of the game and then proceed to have all of the view range advantage that I needed to be able to dominate this round on Pilsen. And hopefully, just hopefully, this UDES will allow us to finish him off and shut him down. Good stuff, boys and girls. A great start for the Senlac. So next up, we're playing on Tundra in a full tier 8 matchup, so you can see how this vehicle performs against its tier. So I've come up with a plan at the start of the game. Win Hill! Affirmative, presses our team. Alright, because look how many light tanks and self-propelled guns there are. Light tanks and self-propelled guns are pretty much making up half of this team. So if we can win the hill, we'll undoubtedly be able to win the eastern flank. And then the slower heavies will not have had a chance to be able to win the west as they're going to clog each other down. Then hopefully we can advance along the north and we can manage to take down this game. So I'm loading a high explosive round at the start. Woohoo! 229 damage. That's a significant low roll. So I'm going to bait round here. I'm going to pretend like I'm going to go around this corner. But look at all those tanks aiming at me. Yeah, mate. I'm not driving out in front of 3 French autoloaders. Who do you think I am? I'm a British tank, old boy. I know about the French people getting sneaky against us all the time, right? Yeah, that's what I say. So instead what we're going to do is come around this corner, and now hopefully we can get juicy high explosive pens. Whoa, that's not a pen actually, 135, but that did as much as our regular round nearly would have. That's a pen though, 2 crits and 269. Hopefully we can get one more in. Well, this isn't going to be a pen on the air on the T-54. So you just definitely got to be careful with what rounds you choose to fire. Talking about being careful with what rounds you choose to fire. Why am I firing standard rounds at a tier 8 Soviet premium medium tank with very heavy armor? The APCR rounds on this tank will definitely give us more of a chance. So we put in we've actually taken out his commander, so he probably won't be able to see us, and hopefully we're going to be able to finish him off. And I was quite surprised that we actually managed to ricochet there. You're just getting an idea, hopefully, that this tank is voracious when it starts to get into combat. This is what a tier 8 light tank is meant to be. It's meant to have bad armor, good mobility, and good combat capacity, but low penetration. And that's something that's missing with all of the standard British light tanks, and something that I just can't really get into them for. The Senlac, on the other hand, I really feel like I'm part of the battle. I feel like I'm engaging with the game itself. I don't feel like I'm having to depend on my team. And that's really one of the big differences between the Senlac and the LHMTV. There's no doubt that I'd say the LHMTV, you can do more scouting. Or should I say, you're forced to do more scouting. You're forced to track your opponents. You're forced to think about getting into advantageous positions to be able to get good view range. Now, I'm not saying the Senlac won't be able to extend its view range and be able to be efficient at scouting. It's probably not going to be as good as the LHMTV is. It's just, with the LHMTV, you don't have the combat option. So when I'm playing my Senlac and when I'm playing my other light tanks, either at tier 8 or tier 9, right up until the British light tanks set the tone for the literally worst in tier damage per minute, I like to be aggressive. I like to try and push the tempo. I like to try and get into positions where I'm going to be able to outflank my opponents, or where I'm going to be able to take advantage of shooting them in their weak armor. And with the Senlac and having the high explosive rounds of Destiny, 90 millimeters of pen, and that wonderful, is it 280 or is it 300 alpha? The 280 alpha, monstrous. Look what we're going to do here. What, one right into the side of the SU-130 PM for 284. Are we going to get to reload again? Not quite. That's a big old slug into the back of the tier 8 Soviet tank destroyer. Hopefully we can manage to get a couple more. And do you know what, in retrospect, I think I should take more high explosive rounds in this tank. And when I'm playing it on stream over the next week or so, I definitely will do. 311! Oh yeah! And we managed to finish him off with 10. And we would have been able to probably take him out. And this just 3,000 damage per minute is absolutely wild. I'm about to make a big mistake here. I didn't reload a high explosive round. If I'd reloaded a high explosive round, I would have been able to kill that artillery in 2 shots. Instead, I'm going to have to fire 3. But considering our rate of fire is so good, we don't really have to worry about that kind of thing. If I was in the LHMTV, I'd be faffing around for maybe 6-7 seconds to be able to load in the second shot and hope the artillery doesn't turn to be able to engage me. With having high explosive rounds in the Senlac, you can do wild things with regards to your DPM and shut down multiple artillery. And it just feels so much better as a combat vehicle. It's an incredible combat tank. So I tried to fire one there at the tracks of the 7501, unable to be able to do so. So instead, what we're going to do is now load the gold and see if we can shut down these guys. But I don't really need gold for the Progetto. I'm going to load standard rounds now, as I don't want to waste the credits for no reason, right? One into the back of the turret. Will we be able to finish him off? He's also got a damaged ammo rack. We're unable to get him, but we're going to hopefully shoot at the cupola here of the VK. We ricochet a standard round. Now we're going to load a premium round. Will we be able to pen the premium round into the cupola? Oh, yes, we will. There we go. Are we going to finish him off, or will somebody else do? Okay, 2 more tanks left to hunt. And the Senlac, by no means slow. And to be able to have that kind of gun handling combined with the mobility, it definitely feels like it's a very frenetic vehicle. Now, whether I think it's going to be good in front line, not so sure about that. I think there are probably better light tanks. I'd probably go for a Black Dog. But the Senlac is going to be no slouch. I feel like the Senlac is still incredibly similar to the M41D, the Chinese variant, and it's quite similar to the T92 as well. But if you want British light tanks and you want to crew train British light tanks, either because you have the high-tier non-premium British light tanks like the Seta, the LHMTV, the G-Saw, even the Manticore, or alternatively, maybe you want to just play some of the really awesome low-tier British light tanks like the Cruiser, then it's definitely a strong tank. Is it going to be worth an absolute, utter mandatory pickup because this is now the new best premium tank in the game? No, I wouldn't go as far as that. I would actually go as far as to say that tanks like the Black Dog are probably statistically stronger overall with the higher amount of damage per minute that they have, and also the higher penetration that they have on the high explosive rounds and the 250 millimeters of heat pen on the standard rounds. Combine that with equal 400 meters view range and about the same kind of mobility, if not a little better mobility, and I think you're probably better to play the German tank or the American tank inside the German tech tree. But for me personally, this is still a great premium tank. It's a nice pickup. I don't think it's ever going to be considered to be overpowered, but I also don't consider that anyone is going to be calling this tank useless. So the game on Pilsane was our ace tank, and we get an All-X medal for destroying 2 enemy vehicles that were higher tier than us. We set the pace with dominating the light tank flank, and after that we made a very tasty profit as well with the extra damage that we got in against the Jagdtiger. 76,000 credits profit. This is a premium tank, not a reward vehicle, and you're going to make decent credits as long as you are not wasting a lot of premium rounds against your opponents. Next up on Tundra, this was a first class for a Confederate and a high caliber medal for the 3,670 damage that we dealt. I believe that is more damage than I was ever able to do in the LHMTV, even though I've played that tank about 40 or 50 times. And I've played the Senlac probably about 10 times or so to be able to get these games today for the YouTube video. And while we did fire a few premium rounds, it's still a 62,000 credit profit. So yeah, I have to admit, it's a fun tank. It's a fun tank to play. The opportunity for high explosive rounds are wild, and doing massive amount of crits to your opponents as well with those high explosive rounds are just so delicious. So with the caveat in mind that I've only played 14 games so far in the Senlac, funnily enough, I have an identical win ratio in the Senlac and also in the LHMTV of 64%. But the statistics and the reason for this win ratio is definitely not identical. If I look at my Senlac, I'm doing 1,869 damage per game, while I'm only spotting 581. I really tried to scout, it's just I kept getting in matches on maps with matchups that just really didn't allow me to be able to spot for my team. Alternatively, when we take a look at my statistics for the LHMTV, we can see my damage is way lower at 1,428. We're talking about doing 400, 500 damage per game less in the non-premium vehicle, but my spotting is way higher, over 1,000 higher per game. Now again, that might be just because I haven't been getting on those light tank maps, Prokhorovkas, your Malinovkas, your Muravankas, even getting in some nice bushes on maps like Lakeville in my first 10-15 games in the Senlac. But I feel like when I do, my assistance in the premium vehicle is definitely going to go up. But this is really what the vehicles, the key difference between the vehicles are all about. The LHMTV doesn't have combat capacity, and so you're constantly thinking, how can I take my tank to be able to scout? How can I take my tank to be able to scout? Now, if you're an incredible scout player, then you're probably going to do well in the LHMTV, or at least you're going to get a decent amount of spotting. The problem is that its combat capacity means that unless you're on a map where you're able to scout, or you have a team that's willing to listen to you, it's incredibly frustrating. I have been so frustrated playing my high-tier non-premium British light tanks because you can't do the damage yourself. You can't make the kills entirely yourself. You can't push the tempo of the game by yourself. You have to try and help your team, encourage them to be able to do it. But unless you've got a team of incredible players, it just doesn't really usually happen. Whereas with the Senlac, you can push the tempo yourself. You can pick up the kills instead of picking up 1.24 kills per game as I have in my LHMTV. I'm picking up more like 1.5. You know, you're killing an extra quarter of a player a game, half a player a game. You're getting less spots, but you're dealing more damage. And I feel like that's how you're going to make the impact in your games with a vehicle like the Senlac. And it just feels so much more rewarding and empowering when you get to have the combat capacity to play yourself. And while, sure, it's a bigger tank, sure, it doesn't have the camera rating of the LHMTV, my feeling is this is just so much more fun. And I guess Wargaming were right when they were trying to balance the statistics of the LHMTV, even though I think statistically it's actually doing very poorly, considering the caliber of players that are playing it. I feel like they put far too much emphasis on the size of the tank, and then giving it pretty much worst in class view range for any of the tier 8 light tanks. And yet when they release a premium tank, just because it's a little bit bigger, it can start to have glorious things like damage per minute, 20 meters extra view range, and while sure it doesn't have the size or the camera rating, it's something that I would be more than willing to sacrifice to gain the capacity on my tank to actually engage in the battles and not rely on my team. So ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that is my opinion of the Senlac. I hope it was useful to you, or maybe you just enjoyed it. If it was, give the video a thumbs up, but if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know what you think about the Senlac in the comments down below. And do you think the statistics of the tank mean that the LHMTV looks like it's completely useless? Or alternatively, do you think that the camera rating and the size of the LHMTV, combined with the alpha damage and the penetration, still give a reason to want to play the standard British light tank? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.